Hi everyone, so good morning and welcome to day 3, our final day of Energy Cork's Energy and the Circular Economy Conference. A big welcome to you, those that were joining us yesterday and the day before, and to those joining fresh today as well. We're delighted to have you here this morning for this very fundamental and important discussion on the circular economy and the just transition. This is the third of our 3 90-minute sessions focusing on the energy-related aspects of the circular economy, with each session packed full of insights and experiences from a wide variety of sectors. I'm Michelle O'Sullivan, Chair of Energy Cork, and I'm very pleased to represent the membership and steering group of Energy Cork and welcoming you all online this morning. As ever, Energy Cork and the events such as this wouldn't be possible without the ongoing support of Cork County Council and Cork City Council through their respective economic development funds. And we're delighted to have Cork Chamber as a conference sponsor this year, and we thank Cork Chamber for the support in bringing this conference to you today. Thanks again to our steering group, especially our conference subgroup, for all their help in putting this 3-day event together. No mean feat, even online. We're particularly thankful to all of our speakers and moderators who've committed to participate. We'll meet today's group shortly, and you can check out the full lineup with speaker bios in the conference brochure. That should be in the chat box shortly. First, a couple of items of housekeeping before we get started. It should be already done, but please, if you could keep your microphones on mute for the duration of the event. We'll have a Q&A session following the presentations. You can use the chat box function to ask any questions. Any questions you might have. We can't promise to get to every question, but we'll do our best and we can follow up afterwards if required. Today's event will be recorded and made available in due course afterwards. You'll be introduced to Sharon Corcoran, Director of Economic Development and Tourism with Cork County Council later in the session to say a few words on the ongoing collaboration with ABODU to develop a skills map for Cork County. Kicking off on Wednesday with the focus on waste to energy and yesterday's session on the circular economy in practice in buildings, transport and heat. Already huge insights and experiences have been shared on a number of the processes, materials, projects and innovations that can help and be part of Ireland's shift to a circular economy. And so I'd like to introduce our moderator today, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion to come from today's session. Dr. Tara Shine from Change by Degrees. Dr. Shine is co-founder and director of Change by Degrees, an award-winning business that advises organizations on sustainability strategy and reporting, employee engagement and sustainability communications. Before setting up Change by Degrees in 2018, she spent 20 years as an international climate change negotiator and advisor to governments and world leaders on environment and development policy. Tara was special advisor to the Mary Robinson Foundation, Climate Justice and Climate Advisor to the Elders. In 2020, Tara was appointed as the co-facilitator of the structured expert dialogue, of the second periodic review under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Dr. Tara Shine is author of How to Save Your Planet, One Object at a Time, a great resource for everyone, highly recommend it. Published in April 2020 by Simon & Schuster. She is science communicator and TV presenter and presented the 2020 Royal Institution Christmas lectures. So once again, we're in very good hands for today's session and I'm very much looking forward to it. So over to you there, Tara, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle, for that very long, slightly embarrassing introduction, and welcome everybody to this morning's session where we're going to focus on the circular economy and just transition. So 2 terms that we hear a lot. I think that many people outside of our small circles might still be struggling to get their heads around what does this mean in practice. I know for the businesses and organizations that we work with in Change by Degrees, figuring out how to put these concepts and approaches into practice through their work, through their strategies is still a challenge. So I hope that what we can get to today is a clearer understanding of how just transition and circular economy apply to the energy industry, energy as a service, the future of how we provide the energy we need to run our society. And I will be ably aided in creating that clarity by all of you participating in your questions, but also by the 4 speakers we have for you today. So the way we're going to run this is each speaker is going to talk for 10 minutes. So it'll be quite rapid fire, but the aim of that is to make sure that we have lots of time at the end for questions and answers with all of you. So I'm going to get straight into it so we can maximize the use of time and start with Brian Leddin. Brian Leddin is TD for Limerick City, member of the Green Party, and plays the very important role of chair of the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Climate Action. I'm also intrigued that Brian holds an MSc in renewable energy. So this is his happy place, I imagine, talking about this topic. So Brian, we're going to go straight to you over in Limerick and hear your words of wisdom first. You're very welcome.
Hey, thank you, Tara. Can you hear me well enough?
Perfectly.
Great. And I'm in Dublin, actually, at the moment.
We won't hold that against you.
Up in Leinster House. So I'll get back to Limerick later. Well, thank you for your kind introduction. And as you said, I'm a TD for Limerick City. I'm the Green Party spokesperson on climate, and I'm also chair of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action, as you said. I'd like to thank as well, by the way, Kieran and Michelle and the team at Energy Cork for inviting me to speak today. It is a privilege to be in this position and that I am in for many reasons. But one of those is that I get to attend and contribute to exciting and enlightening events such as these, and I get to interact with people who are doing incredible work in building a new low carbon society. I have to congratulate the team at Energy Cork as well on your impeccable timing for holding this series of talks. I'm pretty close to the discussions and decision making in government. But even just a week ago, I didn't know for sure that the climate bill was going to be launched on Tuesday. So you guys are either very good at predicting the future, or you're lucky, or you have friends in very high places. And I suspect it might be all three of these. So there's some very excellent speakers to come after me. And they will know much more than I do about the circular economy and just transition. I think my relevance here is to speak about the political aspect of the transition because it's interwoven with the social, cultural, and economic challenge we have in front of us. There is, of course, the past political challenge and the future one. This week, or arguably in the coming months, when the bill is enacted, is the end of just the first phase of this effort in the Irish context. About 15 climate bills have been proposed over the years. And most have fallen, and those that have found their way onto the statute books have fallen far short of what is necessary. And over decades, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people across society in Ireland have played a role in pushing for this legislation, which we introduced this week and hope to see become law very soon. I chaired the Joint Oireachtas Committee that took the draft bill back in October and undertook a sometimes excruciating process of line by line and word for word interrogation of it. We issued our report before Christmas, and this was then taken by the minister and his team, and the legislation was updated accordingly. Some political wrangling was inevitable before we got the finished bill ready and launched this week, but we have it now, and I do believe it's a very comprehensive and radical piece of climate legislation that will hold up by comparison to international law in this area. So the experience of the past 12 months, which is when I have been very closely involved, but also the experience of others before me over the last number of years is what gives me hope. I witnessed incredible cross-party and cross-society buy-in and engagement for what we are trying to do. That is not to say that it has been plain sailing, because it certainly was not. But it also should not be plain sailing, because if something is very easy, then it is probably wrong. Change is hard. It has always been hard and always will be, and it will inevitably take very determined efforts from many, many people to achieve it. With the best will in the world to avoid upheaval, change more than likely means there will be winners and losers. And this is as true when it comes to climate action as it is to any other major challenge that we face. So we must recognize this harsh reality that cutting emissions in half in 10 years will not be easy to do. It will be incredibly hard. And this goes for just transition too. As legislators, we can set targets, develop legislation, be ambitious and talk the talk, but this is the high level. Our efforts have an impact on people's lives, lifestyles and livelihoods, on the economy, on jobs, on people's ability to do what they want to do, to move around, to feed themselves and their families, to have a healthy and comfortable life, and so on. Sometimes these impacts are positive, if not immediately appreciated, but it is true that we usually fail to cover all the bases because we are not perfect and we are not omniscient. It was Samuel Beckett who famously said, "Try again, fail better." And I believe this must be our approach. We are most likely entering a very disruptive period. Our society is going to be shaken up. A just transition means maximizing the opportunity that we have and organizing and managing our society so that as few as possible are left behind. While, as I said, it will be difficult, acknowledging this reality is crucial. My experience on the Joint Oireachtas Committee in the Programme for Government Negotiations before that, and my professional life before politics and my roles in campaign groups and the NGO sector over many years is that working inclusively with determination and good faith is that we can achieve great progress. So I have hope. And I also have far more questions than I have answers. How will we pay to deep retrofit 1 million homes? Who will do this work? How will we train them? Where will we get the materials? How will we construct huge arrays of wind turbines off our coasts without severe ecological impact? How will we reconfigure our road space without slowing traffic to a halt and causing civil unrest? What is the future for our farmers, for the workers in our power plants and their families? What is the impact of a quickly increasing carbon tax going to be? I don't know the answers, but I know these are just some of the very important questions that we need to be asking, and there has to be a comprehensive national dialogue which feeds into the decisions that we take. We are not at the end, we are not even at the beginning of the end, but we are perhaps at the end of the beginning. And that's probably under my 10 minutes, Tara, but I'll finish up and just once again to say thanks to Kieran and Michelle and all the team at Energy Cork for inviting me today. And I'm going to stick around, and if I can contribute to the questions and answer session, I would be very happy to do so. So looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Brian. You've given us lots to think about there. And yeah, I think we're all very excited to see the revised climate bill come before Cabinet this week. Having worked a lot at the international level, I can only reiterate what you say about how much climate legislation really sends a message around our leadership and our commitment as a country to others who strive to do more and who look to us for leadership, especially as a developed country, as a wealthy country. So it is a really important step that we take for our own citizens and the citizens of the world. I really enjoyed what you said. You're very clear that we're going to disrupt the economy. We're going to disrupt society in the next 10 years. But for me, this will be with a view to a better future. But even in that, we can't deny that there will be winners and losers, and we have to look after and protect those who are most vulnerable. That's a key part of the just transition, as is putting people and people's rights at the center of how we plan this transition. So I agree with you completely. That's not easy. We don't know how. No one actually in the world knows how. This is a new thing. And what I would emphasize there too in what you said is the absolute importance of working inclusively, national dialogue, social dialogue. I think this will come up as a theme over and over again in today, because I don't think we can do a just transition without a strong social dialogue with all elements of society, with all of our workers, to make sure that we can make this transition as rapid and as inclusive. Come on. So Brian, thank you. And particularly thank you for staying with us for the questions. I'm going to keep going because at this rate we might have a little bit extra time for questions and answers, which I'm really keen to protect. So I'm going to move on now and talk to Dr. John Reilly from Bord na Móna. John, you're very welcome this morning. John has a very exciting role of being a member of the senior leadership team in Bord na Móna, with responsibility for Bord na Móna's expanding renewable energy generation programme. He aims to add at least 1 gigawatt of new renewable assets to its fleet by 2030. John has a long history and background in working in the utility sector in Ireland and internationally, so he absolutely understands the practical realities of providing the energy that we need to run our daily lives. and how that needs to be done efficiently and effectively and what the future holds. So John, I'm going to go straight over to you. You're very welcome.
Thanks very much, Tara. Can you see that on the screen? The presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep.
You just might go into presentation mode.
Yeah,
so
no problem.
Get a bigger view. Thank you.
I have all of your faces on my screen too. I don't know how to get rid of them, but I won't try just in case I get rid of everything. So look, thanks a million, Tara, for the introduction, and a particular thanks to Kieran and to Michelle from Energy Cork for the very kind invitation to speak at the event. And what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today is I'm really going to talk about the energy element of the transition and what that looks like and has been looking like in the context of Bord na Móna. I'm sure that the vast majority of people on the call today know about Bord na Móna. We're a company that has been in existence for almost 90 years. We're one of Ireland's oldest and most traditional companies. And for much of that time, we did what you see in this picture here. We harvest milled peat. That's been the core activity, which is a very, very labor intensive activity. And therefore it provided enormous levels of employment down through the decades, particularly across the Midlands, but also in the west of Ireland. But part of the other big role for Bord na Móna, of course, was playing a very significant part in keeping the lights on in the country. And we did that really through the bulk of peat that we would mill and harvest. We provided to a whole fleet of Midland peat-fired power stations, I should say. And today, the only one of those power stations left in existence is the one in the top right-hand corner, which is our own power station in Edenderry in County Offaly. And that power station in its heyday would have burned 1 million tonnes of peat. Today, it burns, the majority of the fuel being burned in that power station is sustainable biomass, and we would be taking peat completely out of the fuel mix in that power station by 2023. All of the rest of the peat stations across the Midlands, including the 2 ESB stations in Loughrea and West Offaly, closed last year. So they were 2 big customers for Bord na Móna, and you'll see in a moment why they closed. The other thing that we did with milled peat over the years is we processed it. We manufactured it. The iconic peat briquette, of course, is one of the things that is ingrained in the fabric of Irish society, particularly in rural Ireland. And I can tell you today that the iconic peat briquette will be no more in 2023 or 2024. We would also, as part of our solid fuel offering over the years, we imported coal, bagged coal, and sold coal as well. But as part of the transition that I'm going to talk to you about briefly, we got out of that business about 4 or 5 years ago, but I will come back to that in a moment. So we're really a big logistics company, and we're pulling and dragging raw materials and processed final product up and down the country and exporting it. And when we sat down, I suppose, over a decade ago as a company to look at our carbon footprint, which is something all companies were doing, we actually discovered we didn't have a carbon footprint at all. We had a carbon jackboot. So if we wanted to change, and we knew we had to change, we knew the implications of the CO2 emissions that we were directly and indirectly responsible for. If we wanted to change that, we knew we had some enormous heavy lifting to do, massive heavy lifting to do. So what does that look like? Well, the heyday of milled peat is shown on this graph here. In terms of our core business, the actual heyday of Bord na Móna's activities was during the 70s, 80s and 90s. And given the labor intensive nature of that business, at that point in time, Bord na Móna would have employed over 5,000 people. So back in 1990, when we milled 6 million tonnes of peat, we were employing almost 5,000 people. You'll see that in 2020, the bar, there's no bar here, and it's not that I've forgotten to put it in, it's because the amount of milled peat that we harvested or mined in 2020 was practically zero. We did a small amount for logistical reasons, but we made a very, very important announcement as part of our overall transition to a climate solutions company from a fossil fuels company. We ceased milled harvesting for good, or made the announcement that we've ceased milled harvesting for good in January of this year. And that is going to have a fundamental impact, or is having a fundamental impact on the company, its employees and its stakeholders, its shareholders and people who have an interest in the organization. And the reason we did that was that we began this transition, this energy transition, this transition from a fossil fuel company to what we now term ourselves as a climate solutions company over a decade ago. And we've enshrined that transition and that move in a number of key metrics. And one of those is in the simple metric for any business of turnover and profit. How much of our turnover, how much of our profitability is coming from former fossil fuel brown activities versus the new stuff that we're at on the renewable energy side and the resource recovery side, as we call it, with a very, very active waste management and recycling business. So you can see from these very, very quick graphics here that in 2006, when we really began this journey, 90% of our turnover came from brown activities. By 2020, we had reached a very seminal moment in that transition, in that last year, almost 50% of activities are now coming from the new board of Móna, the renewable energy and all of those bits and pieces. And by 2024, we will effectively be out of the brown stuff. There'll only be over 80% of our turnover will come from green activities. I don't think there'll be many companies in the country who could measure and say that. But obviously that transition has been enormous. And the resource recovery piece is a very interesting one here. Not an awful lot of people know about our the circular economy activities that we're at, but the two major pillars of Bord na Móna today are its renewable energy business and its resource recovery business. And we're really focused in that business on energy from waste and recycling. We opened one of Ireland's first plastic recycling facilities last year. So we're investing very, very heavily in that circular economy. So it's not just about taking peat out of the fuel mix. However, the reality of this transition, which has been well planned, by the way, means that direct employment in the company has fallen by over 50% in that period I've just shown you. And that's as a direct result of a clear strategic objective to move away from things brown. And this is the business that I am lucky enough to head in Bord na Móna, and this is the new part of what we're doing. This is a picture of our Onany wind farm in County Mayo. It's a 100 megawatt onshore wind farm operating in one of the best wind regimes in Western Europe. We have offshore wind speeds that they have in the North Sea, and that all these people are ploughing into the North Sea to do offshore wind. You don't have to do it to get outputs like we get in Mayo. You just stick up a few of these very large turbines on what is a former cutaway peatland. So this 5,000 hectare piece of ground has been providing energy for the state for decades, but now it's doing it in a much, much more sustainable way. Phase 2 of this development will be developed over the right-hand side. But interestingly, if you look at this corner of the picture here, you will see these little small dots. They are Ireland's first commercial wind farm that Bord na Móna developed in 1992. Tiny things, still operating today, 30 years in operation. And next year, we're going to take that wind farm, disconnect it from the grid, and start to produce green hydrogen. So that's the next big step for Bord na Móna in terms of our contribution to the energy transition. Green hydrogen produced from green electricity in Ireland could be one of the big game changers in terms of decarbonising sectors such as heating and transport. So this is at the cornerstone of the transition. And part of what we were doing here is driving a 1.6 billion euro investment programme in renewables. And in fairness, even though we have reduced employment directly in the organisation as a result of this energy transition, this new business, while it doesn't employ anywhere near the same number of people, it does provide significant what we call indirect employment. So whereas we don't employ directly the people who build these things, we employ the operators of them, there's significant employment in the construction. And in terms of the next decade or 20 years, there will be a lot of construction employment that can absolutely be termed green. Because in order to pursue the energy transition, we're going to have to see a lot of infrastructure constructed and built. So from our perspective, though, what is really, really important in terms of, and I go back to our decision a few years ago to take coal out of our business for strategic reasons, for part of this transition. It actually was great for us on our green balance sheet as a company, but it did nothing for the company's for the country's greenhouse gas balance sheet, because all that happened was somebody else flooded coal or other products, fossil fuel products, into the market. So we're very, very determined in the energy transition that when we close and take peat out of the fuel mix, we want to replace it with renewable alternatives. So in terms of the electricity sector, in 2015, when the power stations were still running at full tilt, the total emissions on the country's balance sheet from the electricity sector was about 12 million tons. And peat was responsible for about 3 million tons of that total. That's 25%. 340 megawatts of very important capacity in terms of keeping the lights on. So what we're doing now is we're trying, through our current investment program, we're going to close that 340 megawatts. A lot of it's already closed, but we want to replace it with onshore wind, offshore wind. We're getting involved in the offshore sector in Bord na Móna because of the experience we have onshore. solar and battery storage, things that have zero carbon emissions associated with them. And by the time we get to 2024, Borden and Móna's power generation will be 100% green and will be contributing zero emissions to the country's balance sheet. In terms of the electricity sector, that's making a major contribution in helping the electricity sector get to a net zero position somewhere around 2035 is what I believe we should be trying to aim for there. It's infinitely doable. So in conclusion, though, what we do need to remember in all of this great stuff is that our brown to green strategy, which will ultimately see us moving from the production of peat to more sustainable fuels like ultimately green hydrogen, as I've described, as a non-fossil replacement, fuel replacement. In doing all of that, we're moving from a highly labor intensive activities such as these things into activities that clearly will not provide the same level of employment. But we are going to make a major contribution, we hope, to the decarbonization of the wider economy. And that will be our contribution to the energy transition. But in doing all of that, we do need to remember this motley crew of people here. And this is a very interesting photograph. This is a photograph that was taken in 2015 when we were still a big fossil fuel guzzler and a big fossil fuel producer. And there's about 25 people odd in this. These are colleagues and friends, or former colleagues and friends. Because as part of the journey that we've been on over the last few years of taking peat completely out of our business, almost 75% of those people have left the organization. So when we talk about just transition and we talk about how we do that, this has been particularly painful for Borden and Móna. But let me be very clear. It was absolutely and is absolutely the right thing to do. We needed to change as an organization. We had a big load of heavy lifting to do, and we did it. It was really difficult. Did we get it right? Absolutely not. We made a fair effort. We learned a lot. But in terms of the just transition, having been through all of this as a senior executive in the company, I'm still not really sure what that means. Because when you're telling a 55-year-old train driver who's been employed all his life, all his working life, moving peat, that his job is gone, to save the planet, how do you put that to them, guys? That's the trick here. Because if we don't bring society along with us on this journey, we will not achieve our objectives and goals. So I think it's not just about what companies like Borden and Móna could and should be doing. And I'll finish by saying that one of the things that was suggested when we first said we're going to take 1,500 employees out of the company in the next 5 or 6 years, somebody said, "Oh God, that's going to be terrible. Like, you need to be careful about what you do with them." Sorry, but what I do with them? What does society do with those people? I think Brian made the very important comment, and I think it's great. We've become more mature in this discussion now by talking about the fact that the energy transition, absolutely necessary, will have winners and losers. Let's be clear about that. This idea that I could take some of those people who I had to tell, "I'm sorry, your job is gone," and tell them, "But look, we're going to put you retrofitting houses." Quite frankly, guys, that's poppycock, because their skill sets are not automatically transferable to retrofitting houses. Retrofitting houses is not just about lagging attics and replacing doors and windows. It's about putting in sophisticated boiler controls and heating systems. You can't take a train driver or a secretary who's been involved in that peat business and say, "Here, we can retrain you now to do this." Not possible. So how society and how we as companies and organizations deal with that and make sure that this transition is just. Because from our perspective in Borden and Móna, we're going to do 3 things, or are doing 3 things we think, to contribute to the energy transition, to contribute to making sure that Ireland achieves its climate action plan objectives. 1, we are going to take peat and have taken peat almost completely out of the energy mix. That's the single biggest thing we can do. Secondly, we need to make sure that as we do that, we have alternatives here. We don't just close that business down, put a lock on the gate and say good luck. So we want to replace that energy. Very important. Energy is a vital element of national security, by the way. We want to replace that with clean, zero carbon emission technologies. And that is something we can clearly do in Borden and Móna. But finally, we want to do that in a way that plays to the just transition. We want to invest in new businesses that create sustainable employments across the Midlands, which is our heartland, but also to ensure that the transition is really just, and that we figure out as companies and societies and government what can we do for the losers here? Because in this transition, there clearly are winners and losers. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks so much, Brian. I could tease you and say you did go over your 10 minutes, but you're lucky because Brian lent you some.
I strategically borrowed some time off him. Yeah.
But no, listen, that was very helpful. I think for all of us, it's useful to see what disruption looks like in practice, what it looks like to actually transform a business in a short time scale, to have the honesty about how difficult that is. At the same time, it's very exciting to see how you're reshaping and that this is possible. Right through to what you're doing with renewable energy in the circular economy, with waste to energy, green hydrogen. I'm convinced that's going to be a big part of our future, and I'd love to see Ireland being a leader on that. Love to hear more maybe in the questions and answers and how you're also planning to be part of removing CO2 and storing it through peatland restoration, because I think that fits into the circular approach as well. And I couldn't agree more that the just transition, the jobs part of just transition is a societal issue. Yes, of course, it's the responsibility of the companies, but I think it's also societal, and it makes us think about, yes, reskilling, which we're going to look at now with Liz in some detail, new jobs, like new innovation, which we'll see with green marine as well. But also the role of things like social protection and what is the future of work in Ireland, and how will we protect people who work less or work in a different way, or reward people for volunteering and doing other valuable tasks and skills for us throughout society. And for that, we're going to have to think way more imaginatively, I think, than we have about this up until now. So Brian, thanks so much, or John, sorry, thanks so much. We're going to keep going.
No problem. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you. We're going to hear next from Georgina Foley in Green Rebel Marine. Georgina is Business Development Director with Green Rebel Marine, which is a new company highly invested in the blue economy and offshore renewable energy. I'll let George tell you more about it. I won't attempt to do that for you. George has a long history of working in ocean energy, but also in a whole diverse range of business areas in France and in Ireland. So a real wealth of expertise to bring to our considerations here. So George, you're welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tara, and thank you, Energy Cork, for giving me the opportunity to present. That was hugely insightful, John, so can't wait to talk about that afterwards. I suppose we're coming in at the other end of the scale, so we're a newly established company. We only set up in Q4 2020, so just last year. And this is home for us, so it's Crosshaven. Now, just moving on. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay here. It kicks in. It's stuck.
Sometimes you have to click in the middle of the screen or something to get it to reactivate.
1 second there now. There we go. Yeah. So what we're doing is very simply focusing on the offshore renewable energy, and our business is all about data. So essentially we're acquiring superior data, so the best quality data we can, and then we're analyzing it. And as I say, we're doing that for the offshore renewable energy space. So it's a comprehensive site investigations that we perform for the developers. And we're using dedicated survey vessels and an aircraft which are wholly owned by Green Rebel. So we say we're taking cutting edge marine ICT through our core of scientists, and we're coupling it with decades of offshore experience. So many of the senior members on our team have successfully transitioned over from the oil and gas sector. So we really are just transition in the flesh. All of that to say, we're going to enable Ireland to achieve its 5 gigawatts by 2030. Now we're strategically located in Crosshaven, which we've bought the Crosshaven boatyard there. So we've acquired some nice prime real estate property on Cork Harbour. We're also strategically positioned in Cork Airport, namely we're in alliance with Western Aviation and also AFTA, the Atlantic Flying Training Academy there. And we're also after establishing our marine data center, which is quite small for now with the prospect of growing, also at Cork Airport for the connectivity reasons. So we're offering a local and a secure supply chain. And you've got the circular economy right there in front of you in those images at play. Our business divisions, quite quickly, fishery liaisons, which is key and particularly important and relevant to this topic. We are fully involved in all stakeholder engagement at the community, coastal and fishery community levels. And we're trying to promote the coexistence of offshore renewable energy, i.e. offshore wind farms, with these people who are from the community and the most impacted. Our aerial surveys, we're delighted to say we're the only Irish company offering this service, and we're using leading technology. So we're able to fly, Brian, in terms of protecting the environment and the ecological impacts at a great height. So we're causing as little disruption as possible to the marine environments when we're conducting these key surveys, which not only indicate where is a good place to put an offshore wind farm, but also where is not the right place to put one. So we're really taking that approach in the works that we're conducting. We also do geophysical and geotechnical, and we're advocating and being very disruptive, to use that word we've already heard mentioned, by bringing to the market a multi-client approach. So that again is with the aim of limiting maritime and ecological disturbance. So there's a lot of exciting projects around the coast, both south, east, west, but obviously this is going to create an awful lot of traffic and an awful lot of disruption if we don't get innovative in terms of how we're going to conduct these surveys. And Green Rebel is very proud and very happy to de-risk this for the government and for the developers by going out at risk to collect this data. MetOcean, we're delighted to have acquired a MetOcean solution for the industry. The announcements of that only came out recently, where we're going to be releasing into the market LiDAR buoys, which have not only significance for Ireland, but international significance, because there's such a shortage of this technology. And that's going to bring with it the assembly and manufacturing element here in Ireland. So more jobs to come through that division. So in terms of the just transition, and I suppose where we're coming from as a company, definitely collaboration is key. So we consider that not only national and regional governments need to step up and engage actively with local authorities, but also with the workers and most definitely with the employers and every other stakeholder along the way. I would agree that we're having this conversation always 2 steps removed from the general public, who need to be on the same page with us every step of the way with this. Obviously, a local approach is key. And I think when we look to other countries, i.e. Scotland and further afield, we can see that the most successful economic transitions have always been around a clear vision for that specific region. And that's breaking Ireland up into its component parts, because no 2 regions have the same requirement. No 2 regions have the same population of skilled labor. There's weaknesses and strengths right across the board. And that's what's beautiful about the diversity of what we do. But it needs to be a local approach, and it needs to be down on the ground at the field level. And then obviously the money. Where's the money? Because all of this is not going to happen without appropriate funding and appropriate funding mechanisms. Because we quite often hear there's pots of money here, there, and everywhere. But how are they being delivered, and how are they being executed so that they're being felt at the ground level, and the communities themselves, feel that they can genuinely shape what's going on around them. The government needs to spend. Yeah, we're coming in here as a company that has now spent more than any other any other business, any other company, any other investor collectively. We're now at over 15 million euros of money that we're after investing in terms of assets and in terms of headcount. And we're continuing with this level of investment to try and bring this one through and get Ireland on the roadmap as being the key leader. So I suppose to do all of this, and I know you've alluded to it, Brian and Tara, that's a lot of paperwork. That's a lot of years of hard work. And we all know how much time and effort goes into writing those chunky paragraphs. But we need to really push the resources behind the departments who have this very difficult challenge and push. We don't have time. We don't have time for another failed policy or one that didn't quite, hit the mark and, oh, let's go back to the drawing board and start again. We can't afford for this to happen anymore. I'm just quoting Greenpeace. We can't negotiate with climate change. We have to act or face the consequences. It's here. It's very real. And if I was to change that quote, I would say we just have to act fast. But when we do act and when we do get it right, this is what it's going to look like, guys. This is it. The future is bright. Beautiful, sunny picture of Crosshaven. Work at sea. And these are the kind of jobs that we're creating. We're currently sitting at an effective of 42 people since we started our operations in October 2020. That's growing every week. We're bringing on new people. We're building our scientific core, so we're providing roles for ecologists, environmentalists, geophysicists. We're providing roles to mariners who want to upskill, who want to retrain, vessel managers, engineers, surveyors, data processors and analysts, aerial task specialists, pilots, assembly and manufacturing, and then business support functions. Of our senior team, 4 including myself, are living in Crosshaven. 2 are from Crosshaven originally. We're really, our business support functions, 2 of our most recent valuable recruits into operations management and into office administration, all from the village. So we're really trying to be local, look local, and put into the community what we can. We're very, very optimistic here, but we think it is totally achievable for Green Rebel to have 800 jobs on its books by 2030. We're talking about building out a fleet of vessels. We're talking about building out marine technology at a marine data center in Crosshaven. The sky's the limit, but we can't do it on our own. We need the people, we need the government, and we need, that collaboration and that local thinking and that forward thinking all at the table with us right now. So yeah, we're looking forward to a bright future and employing as many people as we can into this sector. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgina. That is very exciting. Very exciting to hear your plans, the scale of the ambition, both in terms of gigawatts of energy and numbers of jobs that will be created. Very interesting to see that the level of cognizance that's going into the need for stakeholder engagement, very strong engagement with local communities. This is a very important part of Just Transition. It's not just workers within companies. A Just Transition also involves how communities and broader society are engaged and are part of the transition. I think, as you say, the challenge we face now, especially building on what Brian was saying, we have a law almost ready to go. We have great policies, clear action plans in many cases. I know the Climate Action Plan will be updated again this year, but it is at the implementation point that we often get stuck. So really figuring that out and making sure that we get the money and funding behind this to actually deliver the change and show society what that change looks like, so it actually becomes something really concrete and where they can see the benefits. That's I think got to be what we really hunker down on in the next couple of years. So thank you, Georgina. That was fascinating. We'll be back to you. We want to hear more about your local approach, your multi-client approach. All of these things I think will be great to tease out in the questions and answers. But we're going to go on and hear from our last speaker this morning. Elisabeth O'Brien from Limerick Institute of Technology. Elisabeth is a chartered architect and a sustainable energy engineer. She's senior project officer within the development unit and the Centre for Energy Efficiency and Deep Decarbonisation at Limerick Institute of Technology. And Liz is going to focus very much in on the question of skills. So this was raised by John. How do we make a secretary become somebody who can work in Green Rebel Marine, for example? How do we reskill people that were driving trains to be able to retrofit houses? What's involved in all of this? What are the opportunities within? So Liz, over to you. Thank you. You're very welcome. You're on mute, Liz, and you might just go into presenter view. Thank you.
Okay, hope everyone can hear me well and you see my new screen. We're having a few problems here with the Wi-Fi because we've had some mad thunderstorms and things going around here. So thank you, Tara, anyway, and to Energy Cork for letting me speak today. Really interesting topics from John and Georgina, and this leads very well into this presentation, as Tara has already mentioned, upskilling and reskilling for the green economy. So I suppose, yeah, transition of jobs. There will be a huge change in Ireland over the next few years, but as Georgina says, there are some bright years ahead. What we have to do is basically change what we're doing now, and hopefully there will be new jobs coming in on the horizon. There may be losers, as John says, but hopefully we can address, especially the older workers, people who have been bored Pomona for what, 15, 20 years. You know, how do we address them losing their jobs? Can we get them into new skills? So I've already been introduced. I'm an architect, but also a sustainable energy engineer. So I cross two paths. I don't just look at buildings. I also look at the whole climate aspects of things. So, you know, we may include some digital tools as well, such as BIM and virtual realities into our trainings, and that may help us get some of these skills, especially for the younger workforce out there. So first of all, I'll introduce LIT because you may not all be familiar with LIT. So we have 5 campuses and they're spread across Limerick, Clare and Tipperary. And we're growing in numbers at the moment. We have 6,700 students currently attending courses. But what you may not know is that we are joining forces with Athlone Institute of Technology and becoming a technological university. So we are, and that will be right across the Midwest. You see this big circle you see there, we're covering our huge area. And that is happening from September 2021. So it's happening now. You know, a lot of the Institute of Technologies have already amalgamated, such as TU Dublin, and the recent amalgamation of Reilly and Cork into Munster Technological University. So we are putting our resources together, hopefully getting out a lot more trainings and skills for people. So in LIT, we also have a research, development and innovation, which is what we call the RDI. These are the mugshots of the main people in charge. I won't continue and talk about them because I know we're very restricted in time. What is very important from my point of view is the development unit. And this connects the learning and upskilling aspects within the industry, mainly working on EU-funded projects with experts across Europe, but also here in Ireland with familiar partners with Irish Green Building Council, Tipperary Energy Agency, and the educational training boards who deal with all the vocational aspects and apprenticeships. So the development unit has grown immensely over the last 5 years, and we're involved with actually 27 projects. It's actually a huge progression. And the main focus is on sustainability in all fields. It's not just energy and climate change related, but sustainability of rural life. So we are very rural orientated. We work with a lot of social enterprises. We deal with tourism, and there's many other fractions around that. We also use outdoor learning through a new project called Foley. And that's aims to get young people and those left behind in society, because there's many of those not signing on, they're not within the whole network, and they're living in Royal Island with no support. So we're trying to outreach those and try and get them back on their feet and into employment. And this part, we may be doing it in Foley, but it can also be done and help the board de Móna workers as well. So, you know, it can work with a lot of these industries that are going to fall, as exactly what happened with the coke industry and the coal industry. So we need to be aware there's a huge industry out there that we are hoping to upskill and help. So this is our current team. We're based in Tipperary, but there's also another Clonmel office as well as the Limerick office, as I've already mentioned. So this is what we do. So we, as I've already spoken to, we're doing skills for jobs. We need to help people with that. Everyone is talking about skills needs. We're driven by green and digital economy. So what we have to look at, what is happening now. John talked about loss of jobs already in Móna. The industry in Ireland is changing and new skills are needed to fill the gaps. And the new needs, that is required to develop Ireland further and bring it through the 21st century and beyond. So this is a challenge, the scale of the challenge. All public buildings are to be NZ by 2030, and this will require 140,000 full-time workers to fulfill this task. Residential retrofit of 500,000 homes to a BER rating of B2. There's review about making it into B1, so it's becoming even more stringent. This needs 400,000 workers. And don't forget the 20,000 new homes that will be developed up to NZ, and those jobs generally will be covered by the existing jobs that are out there. So there is a huge need of people in the industry. Of course, they have to move into different areas. That's the only main challenge that we have. So there's many parts within this multi-layered problem. For designing these houses, crafts and construction workers to carry out the build, technical expertise, all these new BIM coordinating jobs that are out there, supervision, efficient management, monitoring of the works, making sure everything is in compliance. We're looking at financing, whether it's green financing, to help the homeowners build what they need to build. And of course, the customer journey. You know, we need to provide support to the customers and the homeowners and the building owners out there. And many of these workers need to be upskilled or newly trained. So at LIT, we work on many different projects. I've just picked out a few here and I'm going to quickly go through them. You can have these slides and go through them yourselves and contact us if you ever need any information. So how do we upskill workers to reach these targets? These are some of them. The HP for All project. I haven't even mentioned the heat pump story yet, requiring 400,000 heat pumps to be installed in the retrofitting of homes. Developing the entire HP value chain, creating greater awareness of the benefits of heat pumps among building owners, that's one challenge, and increasing the skills of the designers, installers, and the entire supply chain who can fit the heat pumps. There's very little training out there. This is one of the projects that we're dealing with to provide relevant training in small bite-sized training, not these big long courses, because people don't have time to do the big long courses. The next project is digitalization and near zero energy buildings. That's what NZEB is. And this is BIMZ. So we have developed 12 learning units. The bite-sized training units. BIMCert is also another project done through TU Dublin. These are online courses. And these will suit much of the industry. And these can be standalone online learnings that we have online, and they're free, but I'll talk about that later. They can be grouped together as a module, and this is directed at the higher institutes or even vocational levels. These are open for them. They can have these resources. And they can also be used in existing trainings, because this is what we're doing at the moment. We're piloting these, and by early next year, they'll be ready to go to the market. Anyone can take these. And this is the first step of getting these micro learnings out there for people to use. And the aim is to improve efficiency in managing NZEB construction. It's needed. That's what they're asking for. These 500,000 retrofitting and all these new homes need to be up to this standard. And we have to make sure the NZ design and construction complies with legislation. Using BIM or other digital tools makes it a lot easier for people to achieve this. The next one is Buzz League. This is a slightly different focus. The focus is on a one-stop shop to find training as an island. And this is a mobile app called the Build Up Skills Advisor app. You can go onto Google Play and download it, and there are many trainings on that. And the idea of this app is to direct people where they can do trainings, because that is another problem. People don't know where to go. This is a one-stop shop, and it's going to be linked right across Ireland to all these different trainings. It's in early days at the moment, but next year it will be fully running. So we'll provide short trainings for hardware and DIY organizations. One of the missing gaps that we have is fine teaching the workforce, but the people they buy the products from need to have information. They need to know what they're selling. So this is one of the other things we're doing, helping the hardware, which we have them all on board, to support and advise contractors and homeowners on the products, materials and systems. Big failure, getting the wrong product or material into the building and constructing it incorrectly. So we're working with Irish Green Building Council on this, and we'll carry out a number of campaigns throughout this next year across Ireland. So keep your eyes open for that. It's also hoped that a training clause can be incorporated into the procurement legislation to ensure that we have skilled workforce. And that leads very nicely into this next project on skills in green procurement.
Can you just take one more minute? Is that all right, Liz?
That's fine. I've nearly finished. So yeah.
Right.
Yep. So this is to make sure we have the clause. One thing I will be sending out is a survey, and I want to carry out some interviews around this project. So contact me if you're interested in helping out on this. You'll see my email at the bottom here, but you'll have the slides anyway. The next one is construction blueprint. It's going to tell Europe what is going to happen in the construction industry for the next 10 years. This is a huge project. And from this, we will also be looking at the DASB. This is the new thing we have at LIT. This is one of the most important slides. Maybe I shouldn't put it last. So this is for a digital academy we're setting up between LIT, GMIT and Athlone Institute of Technology with IGBC and TEA. And it's a hub where we'll be holding a huge amounts of different trainings. And it's not just for special purpose, minor awards or major awards at level 7, 8, 9. It's also for micro learnings. And we'll be holding an open-ended resource there, which we're working with the construction blueprint with, so anyone can avail of these trainings across industry. So this is a quick conclusion. It's a challenge, it's immense. We can reskill and upskill. People will have to be flexible. That's the bottom line, you know, moving into different industries and different areas. But I do agree, moving from board and Móna into retrofitting houses may not be for everyone. It may suit some people, but not everyone. And we have to be aware of that. And we need to use different type of skills, digital online trainings, micro credentials and badges, building up your credits, and alternative delivery modes. And really, that's all I've got to say. I'd just like to thank you all for listening, and I hope these help.
Thanks so much, Elisabeth. That is really great. There's so much happening there. More than I have to say, I certainly realized, and great to see the urgency and how quickly you're bringing this to fruition. I think, yeah, the green and digital economy, the whole availability of online courses, the fact that these are free, they're available in short blocks, they're accessible to people is really, really key. It makes me think about reskilling, but also it makes me, you know, pose questions to myself around is our education system, the broader education system, also fit for purpose? Are we going to be creating through, you know, my kids in primary school and secondary school, those of us who have kids of university age, are they getting also right now the skills that will be needed for the new economy, the new green and digital economy? We can come back to that in the discussion. So everyone, you're welcome now to join the four speakers. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic range of insights, really, really informative, very practical in nature. So thank you to you all. I have a few questions that have come in that I might get started at. Brian, we might go back to you first. So I think there's a question that came in from Donald Kassan, which I think is, in this case, it's focused around green hydrogen, but I think it applies to many more of these things, where sometimes there are legislative or regulatory blockages to moving things forward. His key question was, how can legislators facilitate, for example, for the rapid expansion of green hydrogen? How might that come about? Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Tara, and thanks, Donald, for the question. We're at the very start of the green hydrogen story, and there's a lot of pieces in this puzzle that aren't in place yet, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm very positive about the potential there. Very happy to hear John's report on what Board na Móna is doing. I think the experience that Board na Móna have in that, and other companies that are breaking new ground here, is going to tell us how we go forward. The one thing I'll say is as a government, we're fully behind this, because we recognise green hydrogen is potentially Ireland's competitive advantage over most other European countries because of particularly our offshore wind resource. If we can realise that, and that, we've far more energy than we need off our coast. And green hydrogen really works because of the cost of generating it, the limitations of it, and so on, the losses involved in converting electricity to hydrogen. It works, when you have huge amounts of energy, and we do off the west coast. We've got 70 gigawatts at least of realisable energy off the west. Far, far, far more than we will ever need. Even if we electrify our whole economy, we'll have more than we need. So I think it's the context of developing that offshore resource that's going to unlock the green hydrogen market and that space, and the route to market. All of that needs to be developed. We do have a really important role as legislators, but I think we're very early in the story yet. We have to develop the green hydrogen strategy. I think once the system in Ireland, the political system, realises that potential of the offshore wind resource and the green hydrogen potential then after that, I think we'll get fully square behind it. And whether we're there in government or the next government or whoever's there, I can't see the state not getting fully involved there. So I'm very positive about it. There's a lot of questions over it still. There's no question about that. I'd be very interested to hear John's views, because they're gone down the road of actually developing a project at the minute. So you've thought through a lot of this already, right? So fully behind it, but I think it's early days yet.
Thanks, Brian. When you come back to reflect also on how I think it's still going to take a while for the political system to get the reality of some of these exciting new innovations like green energy. Then what's the role of all of us on this webinar, who are obviously very interested in this, in helping to bring that information and that opportunity to the political system so this can happen faster, because we don't want to wait another electoral cycle before we start to talk about green hydrogen, for example. So I think that's up to all of us to work with you to try and accelerate that conversation. Brian, I'm going to come to you to pick up the conversation on green hydrogen, and also because there's lots of questions for you. Kevin O'Keefe wonders, will Board na Móna also engage in carbon sequestration in addition to green energy production? And Aidan wondered, are you looking at alternative to the peat briquette for people in Ireland that are still reliant on solid fuels? That's just a couple of questions for you, please. John.
For John, I think. Yeah.
John, not Brian. I don't know why I'm mixing up. Sorry, John.
No problem. I've been called worse. Tara. There's no problem. Yeah. So look, first of all, just to say, we are firm believers in the green hydrogen story. Absolutely. We've done a lot of work on it. You're absolutely right, Brian. There's still a long way to go. I'm a chemist by profession, by the way. I'm not an engineer. And producing and making green hydrogen is not a problem at all. Next year, as I said, we will be producing, I hope, our first kilos of green hydrogen up in Mayo, onshore. We don't have to go offshore to do it at all. We've an onshore wind speed regime in the west of Ireland. You don't have to go offshore to produce relatively cost-effective green electricity, which is a key input to green hydrogen. So I won't say any more than that, other than I think green hydrogen could turn Ireland into the Saudi Arabia, we've heard this before, of the 21st century energy mix. And if we don't do it, by the way, we should be shot. That's all I will say. In relation to the other questions around it's very interesting. We're trying to get away from burning things, you know, and I think one of the key things that we have to look at from the point of view of what's causing most of the problems here in the energy sector, it's actually the combustion of fossil fuels. So the combustion, there's a big debate to be had about, you know, will we still need to combust stuff? Will we still need to burn stuff in open fires? The peat briquette will be gone. We've been a very, very proud producer and a very important supplier of home heating products for particularly rural Ireland. And as a company, we intend to try to stay in that game. So we will be looking and are looking actively at replacements, but they must be green, they must be sustainable. And I'd have to say the bar that we've set for those types of products, I think it's going to be really, really difficult to see us replace the peat briquette, the iconic peat briquette, with something that we can really deem as sustainable. So that's a simple answer to the question. We're going to have a go. We are having a go. We've been trying for quite a few years. It's a challenge for sure. In relation to this issue of burning things and combusting things, the renewable electricity that we generate, as most people know, from wind and solar and all that stuff, it's intermittent. It's reasonably predictable from a weather forecasting perspective, but it's intermittent. We will still require thermal capacity on the power system to keep the lights on. That's the physics of the electric power system. So from that perspective, we in Bord na Móna don't believe that we will be completely able to stop burning things in the next 15 or 20 years. And that comes back to the point where green hydrogen could come in here. It's not just about heating homes and industrial emissions. We put natural gas into our gas-fired power stations today. Flexible peaking capacity that really supports deployment of renewables. We need to be putting zero carbon fuel into that to burn it, green hydrogen. That's where we would like to see this thing going. So certainly looking at all of that. And the final piece, Tara, is in the context of the sequestration piece. Another very, very significant challenge. And the good news is, though, that we in Bord na Móna really believe that our former peatlands, aside from developing wind farms on them, where that wind farm I showed you up in Mayo, we're only taking up 3% of the total size of that site with infrastructure to develop significant quantities of the most sought after commodity, bar none, in the world today, green electricity. And the great news is the former cutaway peatlands in between those turbines, we can weave some magic on that through a peatland restoration program that we're beginning to undertake. And we believe the science is telling us that could, if we do it in the right way, it could play an important role in sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. Now, again, I'd have to say as a scientist, the volume of carbon that it might sequester, I think we're not really sure yet of whether that will be big, small, big or small. It'll be something. The key question is it going to be game-changing or groundbreaking? But we're going to do it. The other side of the sequestration piece, of course, from Ireland's perspective, is we should be planting a hell of a lot more trees. You know, they are, without a doubt, trees are the biggest consumers of CO2 from the atmosphere. Hence the reason why biomass in its form as a heating fuel is considered carbon neutral, because in growing, and they grow quickly, we did try years ago to claim that peat was renewable, because it does take about 5 million years for peat to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. But we lost that argument in about 1995 and we ended up in this direction. So that's a long-winded answer, Tara, to the three questions.
Thanks so much, John. Yes. Peat, yeah, I love that definition of a renewable versus a finite resource. But yeah, our peatlands are our Amazon rainforest. So it's another reason why it's great to see the cross-references to biodiversity in the new climate action bill, because surely nature-based solutions are going to be one part. And again, this is never an either or when it comes to climate action.
No.
It is important.
It is important, Tara, to differentiate between virgin peatlands who do that work very, very good. And we've only got a small percentage of Ireland's peatlands, by the way, only 7%, but they're cutaway. They're slightly different. Doesn't mean we can't return them back into a state that they can sequester carbon, but they're not as good as virgin peatlands.
I can only recommend my own Christmas lecture as a way for people to understand how peatlands can help to restore and remove peat. We had great fun making demos to try and bring that to life for people. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think given that 1,300 people die a year from air pollution, switching one solid fuel for another is not going to be the answer. But then it does beg the question then of how we invest more rapidly in homes that are reliant on solid fuels so that they get the retrofits as a priority, whether they're in the Midlands where we know we have many households that are reliant on solid fuels, or in other parts of rural Ireland. I think that's going to be absolutely key. There was a question which I might pose to you, Georgina, that came in from David. Do we have capacity for an offshore energy hub in both Cork and Limerick? Is there room for two?
Yeah, 100%. I think there most definitely is, particularly when we look to what John's just after saying about the hydrogen element. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the big boys that have come to town are here for the big prize. They're here for that hydrogen element out in the Atlantic. And that's going to need a whole load of infrastructure and skilled people and resources to be able to provide it. So, you know, Ireland is, at the end of the day, an amazing country because it is the size it is as an island nation. We're English speaking. There's a whole load of boxes that get ticked that make us the test bed of all test beds on this planet. And if we can show that we can get this right, and we just so happen to have the biggest resource around us, then yeah, I agree with John. If we don't go for this, if anyone in government does not realize that this has to happen, then we should be shot, because the rest of the world knows it needs to happen. So yes, there's going to be an explosion of jobs and resources, Limerick, Cork, Rosslare, around the island to support this.
Thanks, Georgina. Yeah, I fear we might be still slightly at risk from the firing squad. I think we do need to do a little bit more. I think if we did a survey of Brian's colleagues up there in Leinster House right now, I don't think many of them would be very familiar with green hydrogen, or even the inner and outer workings of offshore wind and offshore renewables. So I think that, I take that as a collective responsibility for all of us almost on this webinar to do better on that. Liz, lots of questions coming in for you too. One here from Harry that I find interesting, where he wonders if there's need for a new type of skill set, what he calls a comfort engineer, around making people in buildings comfortable. So he wonders if there's an overemphasis in upskilling on the actual physical skills around installing heat pumps and insulation versus understanding the whole theory, I guess, around what it is to create zero emissions buildings and how we change how we build and how we live in buildings. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, see, everyone talks about these skills for energy efficiency. It's not just energy efficiency, we're talking about indoor air quality. You know, that's an important part as well. If we make a building airtight, which you have to for a heat pump, we also need to consider the air quality inside. But there is an issue about the comfort side of things. It's so important. If somebody is comfortable in the heat and they're sitting down, fine. But a lot of the time, people generally bump up the heat. So there's a false comfort level that people have in these newly developed houses which have got heat pumps, because we're so used to, even my house, I live a very, what I call an aerated house, because it's an old style. To retrofit that would be not economical for me. So I sit in jumpers, but a lot of people will not sit in jumpers. They insist on wearing t-shirts now, etc. So they bump up the heat levels unnecessarily. So, you know, it's getting that balance. If you're going to do an energy efficient house, you have to make sure you know how to use it and keep it as an energy efficient house, not overuse the facilities that you have. And it's not just that, it's, how do I explain it? It's, you know, if you have underfloor heating, you need to know how to regulate it. You need to have the information on how to do it. And that's part of the training. It's not just constructing the building, it's also providing information to the homeowners, how to use these facilities properly. There's no point doing this house and they're not using it. It defeats the whole object. And that also comes within the maintenance of houses. So, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
It's all encompassed.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have a massive role in teaching people how to live in new homes. I was talking recently to people who live not far away from where I live, in new energy efficient, A-rated homes, but they're not comfortable.
No.
And perhaps that is because they haven't learned how to work the house.
Exactly.
When you look at the statistics around how people can and can't use thermostats, so many people rely on the finger to turn the heat on and off rather than even programming the thermostat. So taking time to do that, I think, is important. There's also a question in here around the need for quality assurance. So this is from John Burgess. So if people are having experiences, and these experiences spread from peer to peer and through down the road and through neighborhoods around, poor quality installation of heat pumps or insulation, or the wrong insulation being put in the wrong type of house, then people lose faith in the system quite quickly. So how is that being tackled within the skills training that you're providing, the sort of certification and sign-off side of things?
Yeah, I mean, even in the BIMSEED project I talked about, we actually have some learning units on that, and how to make sure you get compliance. It's not just NZ compliance, it's compliance right across the board, making sure you know what the building regs are. But as I said, it comes from design as well as construction. It's making sure they actually meet. Quite often, we know that they're designed to a certain standard and they're constructed completely differently. They even use different materials. So it's getting someone to make sure that they actually achieve what they're supposed to achieve. There's a huge performance gap in many of these houses. I mean, that was so acknowledged in the boom when we built 25% of our houses were built during the boom. Majority of them do not comply with the original drawings. So, it's now, especially over the retrofit, because we have to do these retrofit. I saw a tab here about the retrofit coordinator. There's huge need for a retrofit coordinator. There's a huge difference between constructing a new build and retrofitting an old building. There's almost two different skill sets. I always say if you can retrofit, you can do a new build, but you can't, it doesn't work the other way around. So in UK, they have this new retrofit coordinator that they're talking about, PAS 21035, and it's done by a retrofit academy. We're trying to bring that into Ireland. So that will be a key change if we do get that on board. Trying to do it as a free resource as well, so to outreach to a majority of the industry. That is key. That's what we need. We also do a retrofit advisor and installer as part of our project we worked with Irish Green Building Council. And that's part of that Buzz app I was talking about before as well. There are training aspects in there, directs you to the trainings that you need to do to be qualified as a advisor. So it's all coming through. It's not slowly coming through. There's huge amounts of work involved in it, but it will be there from this year and next year onwards. There'll be a key change.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to ask Brian was, when we look even in Cork, we can see that just this disruption, this transformation of society is going to affect different industries and different jobs in different ways. So, I think even of mechanics, they're going to have to work completely on electric cars almost by 2030. It's new skills, but it's also less work. You don't have to service an electric car so much. Our aviation and travel sectors are changing really quickly. That's going to have an impact on us in Cork. Anything that is linked to the fossil fuel industry, refining, is also under threat. Some producers of single-use plastics businesses are under threat, and that's also linked to the climate challenge. So if we want to help make this transition fast, and we know that all these different sectors are going to be affected, this is way beyond the Midlands and what Bord na Móna are dealing with. This will be a nationwide issue. What are the government's priorities, or what are your priorities in terms of making sure that that workers are going to be helped and protected in this transition?
That's a great question. We're in government since June of last year. The key priorities on climate are the climate bill, which we have now. It took longer than we would have hoped. And also the marine planning legislation, which is about unlocking the offshore renewable resource. Like I mentioned it in my words at the start, that I have more questions than answers on how we do this. I see this as incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging, but also incredibly necessary. I don't think we can do it without a very comprehensive national dialogue, and that's not really happening yet. I think that needs to be, where we start. I think Elisabeth has given us numbers there on the level of employment that's going to be required to make that transition. You can't just flip a switch and do that. Like that, we're going to have to initiate vast training programs, retraining programs. We're going to have to get kids that are at school interested in this area to go down, to get into retrofitting, engineering, and so on. We're really only at the start, Tara. There's, as I said, there's a lot of pieces in this puzzle yet, and I'm not sure. You've alluded to it, like just how hard this is going to be. I'm not sure most people realize how hard it's going to be, and I think that is what we need to be saying now, that this is going to be hugely challenging. But on the other side of that, I think John and Georgina have alluded to this, is that there's vast opportunities. So both those stories need to be told, and they need to be told quickly, and it needs to be this national conversation. And it simply hasn't been in the last while. So I think that's where we need to go. Our priority, as I said, is just getting that climate bill across the line. For a while there in the last few months, we thought that might not happen, and it might become one of the victims of political wrangling, and that so many other bills have fallen by the wayside. We need to get that through, and then this very serious dialogue needs to happen, and indeed we need to develop the measures. And as you probably know, the Climate Action Plan, as opposed to the bill, but the consultation on the Climate Action Plan has been launched during the week as well. That's running for 8 weeks, and that's going to be a short but significant effort in getting individuals and stakeholders and communities involved in just figuring out what we do next.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Yeah, absolutely. The 51% reduction by 2030 is the clearest call to action that any business or investor could need. So yeah, we cannot underestimate the importance of that piece of legislation. And thank you all who have worked on it. Akiboy, you have a great question on the potential of hydrogen storage in a solid fuel state to fill peaks and gaps. We're not going to have time to get into it, but chase John on that one, or maybe Green Rebel have views on that too. If not, look up the work of Dr. Anas Abu-Hamid on storage of hydrogen in solid state. Really interesting stuff. Look, we're going to stop there. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for all the questions. We want to hear from 2 more people before we close today. First up is Sharon Corcoran, who's Director of Economic Development, Enterprise and Tourism at Cork County Council. She wants to tell us a little bit about a Bodo, which relates to remote working and a survey that they're doing at the moment. So we're going to hand over to Sharon, and then we're going to finish up by going back to Michelle for a close today. But from me personally, thank you very much, Kieran and Michelle and Energy Cork, for inviting me along today. I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of the conversation. Thank you to all our amazing panelists. And Sharon, I don't see you, but hopefully you will appear momentarily and you could tell us a little bit about a Bodo. Thank you.
Thanks, Tara. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, that's fine. It doesn't matter if you can't see me. I'm okay with that. First of all, that was very interesting. I only came in at the end of your conference there, but very, very interesting. Cork County Council, as you know, is one of the funders of the Energy Cork network or cluster, and it's fantastic to see that it has grown to have so many participants and so many members. So look, well done on that conference, and I suppose it is timely now, given the as the Deputy Leddin there was talking about the Climate Action Bill becoming legislation. So look, well done to you all. I just wanted to talk briefly about what we, a project that we're running here in Cork County Council, and I'm hoping that I can maybe get your support. for it. That's the support of the companies who've registered for this conference. We know that there is 268,000 plus people working in Cork, that's Cork City and Cork County. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture the skills base of that working population. The last census obviously captured the skills, but that was in 2016. And we know that the next census won't be until 2022. So we probably won't have the results of that until 2023 at the earliest. So what we're doing here is, this is an attempt to try and encourage people just literally to take 3 minutes out of their day and to register their skills on a platform. The link is there. I think you have it up on the screen. It's www.abodu.com/working in Cork. And literally, there is a tab when you go into it saying map my skills. You will be anonymous. All you're asked to give is your air code. So because what we want to present is a heat map, a live map of where the skills are based. There's 5 questions. We really want to find out what your skills are. Are you working from home or are you commuting? Which would you prefer? What industry you're working in, and how long it takes you to commute. So it is primarily map my skills, but we're also trying to get a handle on, and this obviously feeds into the whole carbon reduction process, which is about trying to encourage people maybe to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, as opposed to traveling long commutes or even short commutes into the office. So the 2 essential aspects of this survey are capturing your skills and finding out how many people either are doing the hybrid model presently, and what would people like into the future, and how can we encourage people to adopt the hybrid model. So it's as simple as that. I'm really asking because we have over 4,000 people registered on it from Cork City and County, but we know we've 268,000 people working. So what I'd like to do is try and get as many employees as possible, self-employed, whatever, anyone who's working, who has a skill to put on the map. So I'm just asking maybe companies who are attending this conference today, if they could encourage their employees just to take 3 minutes out of their day and register their skills. It's literally called Map My Skills. So the tab that you've up there has actually been changed. There's a new registration platform now, and it literally says Map My Skills. So it's not about being employed, it's not about job hunting. This is a completely separate survey, and it's literally mapping your skills. So thank you very much, Tara and Kieran, for giving me the opportunity to just promote this. And I really hope that we can get the numbers to grow, because 6 or 7 years is a long time to wait for an update on the mapping of skills in the Cork region. The world has changed since 2016. So we'd love to, if you could help us promote the survey and literally get people to engage.
Sharon,
Thanks,
can I ask you, for those of us who want to share it, would we find things to retweet on Cork County Council, or would we go to Abodo to do that?
Well, actually, you could both. But okay. I'd ask you to go into, you see, Abodo will have, they're obviously carrying out lots of projects for different companies and different regions. So this one is specific to Cork. So it's abodo.com/working in Cork. And that's the one that we, Map My Skills, that's it. Okay. So you go in there. So I've sent Kieran the link. So maybe if you could just send that link out to your people, and I'd love you could, whatever social media platform you'd use, it's really just try and get them to put their skills up there. It is anonymous, I should say. I should have said that first. And it's data GDPR protected. So the names of people will not be shared. The only reason for the air code is that we get literally a live point on our heat map, but it's really about putting your skills up there and your commuting time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara. Thank you.
Back to you, Michelle, for the closing. Thanks.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Sharon, there for sharing an update on the work ongoing in Cork County Council as well. And I see Kieran popped a link there in the chat box. So we'd encourage everybody to check that out. And as you were saying there, to share it and share it widely. So thank you very much. A massive thank you to our speakers today, Brian, John, Georgina, and Elisabeth. That was really fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your efforts and your insights there. I think, what really came out of that discussion is that need for the inclusivity in the discussions and the future pathway and bringing more people into it all the time, engaging everybody in that discussion. And throughout this whole 3 days, working collaboratively has really been a key part of all of the discussions, you know, so to be inclusive, to work collaboratively and bring as many people into this transition so that we can ensure that it's a workable transition, and it's, you know, it gives people a good value and quality of life going forward in how they work and in how you live and everything, you know, on all your activities. So look, it's a very necessary changes that we're making. There's no two ways about it. And Georgina, I think you wrapped it up there very succinctly with the quote from Greenpeace. You know, we need to get this done. There's no negotiating with climate change. So we are in that kind of pivotal time at the moment to really progress forward with this. And, you know, when you look at the breadth of activities that's happening there, even looking at John and board Móna, you know, the lived experience of it, Georgina, you know, you're really looking at the emerging opportunities, and then that skills element within it, you know, and making that so accessible and available to people, you know, even looking at how that's presented and, you know, the kind of bite-sized kind of chunks, the shorter kind of courses, making sure that people can avail of those opportunities as well. So I think it's how we try and match the, you know, the people in the roles that are going to cease to be and be part of where we need to go in the future with those opportunities in the future, and the skills dialogue and discussion as part of that is going to be so important. So thank you all so much. It was really, really interesting. A big thank you to our fantastic moderator, Dr. Tara Shine, for bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience to the Q&A session today. So thank you very much. And with that, we're at the end of our 3 days of the Energy Cork conference, Energy and the Circular Economy. On Wednesday's session, we focused on turning waste to energy. Again, a big thank you to our panelists, Inda Buckley from Carberry Group, Conor Jones from Endeavour, Niamh Callanan, Irving Oil, Niamh Gillen, Gas Networks Ireland. And then yesterday's session focused on the circular economy in practice in buildings, transport and heat. So another big thank you to our panelists there, Donna Gartland of Codima, Niall Crossan, Ecological Building Solutions, Mario Pagliaro of CNR, Italy's Research Council, and Kieran Gallagher of ESB. And again, those were fascinating conversations, you know, that was really looking at, you know, all of the outputs of a process and how we can, you know, not look, you know, redefine waste essentially as another resource, you know. So there's so many great innovations and projects going on. So we will have those recordings available and they will be put up in due course. So please do check them out if you missed any of those days as well. So yes, and today's again, fantastic with the circular economy and the just transition. So thank you to all of the panelists across all of the 3 days for all your engaging contributions and your helpfulness in preparing for the event as well. A big thank you to our 3 moderators across the days. So we had Jerry Murphy on Wednesday, we had Val Cummins yesterday, and Tara today. So for your hard work, calm heads and insights into bringing your own experiences and knowledge to the session. So well done to you all for making the event run so well. A big thank you to Cork Chamber for sponsoring our conference over these 3 days. And as ever, thanks to Cork City Council and Cork County Council for their continuing and vital support via the Economic Development Funds. Thanks to the steering group members of Energy Cork and especially our conference subgroup, including Jackie Quinn, our previous chair, Brian O'Regan, Dennis O'Sullivan and Dory Talent for all your help in putting this together. And a big thanks especially to Energy Cork Cluster Manager Kieran Latisse for organising all of the proceedings and doing an incredible job as always. So thank you very much, Kieran. Fantastic. And last but not least, thanks to you all for tuning in such great numbers too. We were delighted to host this discussion on what is something that is so important now and how we can, you know, engage everybody, more people in this discussion, learn. We're all on a learning curve as well, learn about the different products and processes, the different potential for different kind of pathways forward as well. So we're very happy to have this conference with Energy Cork and to bring such a fantastic lineup of panelists and speakers to it. So look, if you have any feedback on the event or want to learn more about becoming a member of Energy Cork, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us. And that's kind of where we're at. We've had a fantastic 3 days. Thank you so much for joining in and wishing you all a great afternoon and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.